Jin-Ho looked up from his desk as a gentle tap sounded on his office door. Through the glass panel, he could see the unmistakable blue-tinted outline of Damie, the junior diplomat from the Vexillian embassy. Even after 6 months of cultural exchange sessions, he still found himself fascinated by her otherworldly features. The delicate crest that ran from her forehead to the nape of her neck, the 4 iridescent eyes that blinked in a rhythmic sequence, and the graceful 6-fingered hands that now clutched something small against her chest. "Come in," Jin-Ho called, quickly closing the linguistic database on his screen. Damie entered with the characteristic Vexillian bow, head tilted slightly to the right, left hand extended palm up. Jin-Ho had taught her that humans preferred a simple handshake, but she tended to revert to her cultural habits when nervous, and today she was definitely nervous. "Good afternoon, Linguist Park," she said, her voice modulator converting her natural high-pitched tones into something more comfortable for human ears. "I hope I am not disturbing your important work." Jin-Ho smiled. "Not at all. And please, I've told you to call me Jin-Ho." "Jin-Ho," she repeated, the name sounding musical through her translator. Her secondary pair of eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of Vexillian anxiety that Jin-Ho had learned to recognize. "I have brought something for you." She extended her hands, revealing a small box that seemed to be made of some kind of polished stone or mineral. It was no larger than a paperback book, with intricate patterns etched across its surface in swirling, organic lines. The material had a strange quality to it, appearing solid one moment and almost translucent the next, with faint pulses of blue light emanating from within. "For me?" Jin-Ho asked, surprised by the gesture. Damie nodded, her crest fluttering slightly. Another sign of nervousness. "It is customary among my people to offer a token of appreciation to those who have provided significant guidance. You have been most patient in teaching me Earth customs and helping me understand human idioms." Jin-Ho felt touched. As the lead linguist for the Korean branch of the Interstellar Cultural Exchange Program, he'd worked with many alien diplomats, but none had ever given him a gift before. "That's very thoughtful of you, Damie. May I open it?" "Yes, please," she said, carefully placing the box in his hands. The box was lighter than it looked, and warm to the touch. As Jin-Ho's fingers made contact with it, the blue pulses within seemed to synchronize with his heartbeat. He found a nearly invisible seam along one edge and gently pressed it. The top of the box slid open with surprising smoothness, revealing a crystal unlike anything he'd ever seen. The crystal was roughly the size of a golf ball, with countless facets that caught and refracted the office light in impossible ways. At its center, something like liquid light swirled and moved, creating patterns that almost looked like writing. "It's beautiful," Jin-Ho said honestly, lifting it carefully from its container. Damie's 4 eyes all focused intently on his face, watching his reaction. "It is a memory crystal from my homeworld. They are quite special to us. This one contains information that I believe will be of interest to you." As Jin-Ho held the crystal, it grew warmer in his palm, and the swirling patterns inside became more active. "What kind of information?" "Cultural stories, historical accounts, poems from my world," Damie said, her voice modulator producing a tone that sounded almost shy. "I know you enjoy learning about Vexillian culture." Before Jin-Ho could ask more questions, there was another knock at his door. His colleague Min-Soo stuck his head in, then paused when he saw Damie. "Sorry to interrupt," Min-Soo said. "The director wants the translation of the Centauri trade documents by 5. "I'll have them ready," Jin-Ho assured him. Min-Soo's eyes fell on the crystal in Jin-Ho's hand. "Whoa, what's that?" "A gift from Damie," Jin-Ho explained. "A Vexillian memory crystal." Min-Soo raised his eyebrows but said nothing more before ducking out. Jin-Ho turned back to Damie, who seemed even more nervous than before. "Thank you for this incredible gift," Jin-Ho said sincerely. "I'll treasure it." Damie's crest relaxed slightly. "You accept it then?" Officially? The question seemed oddly formal, but Jin Ho attributed it to Vexillian customs. Yes, I officially accept your gift with gratitude. A visible wave of relief passed through Damie's entire body. Her 4 eyes blinked in perfect unison, something Jin Ho had never seen before. I am pleased. There will be much to discuss in the coming days, but for now, I must return to my embassy. After Damie left, Jin Ho placed the crystal on his desk and watched as it continued to pulse with inner light. Throughout the afternoon, he caught himself staring at it between translations, mesmerized by the flowing patterns inside. That evening, as Jin Ho was preparing to leave, Tai Young from the Xenobiology department stopped by his office. Is that what I think it is? Tai Young asked, pointing at the crystal. A Vexillian memory crystal, Jin Ho confirmed. Tai Young gave him an odd look. And a diplomat just gave it to you. Did she explain what it means? Cultural information, stories, poems, that sort of thing. Tai Young looked like he wanted to say more, but instead just shook his head. Interesting. Very interesting. Later that night in his apartment, Jin Ho placed the crystal on his bedside table. As the room darkened, the crystal's glow intensified. Suddenly, it projected a series of complex symbols onto his ceiling, intricate Vexillian script that shimmered and moved like living things. Jin Ho sat up in bed, staring in wonder. The projected script was in an ancient Vexillian dialect he had only seen in historical texts. He grabbed his tablet and began recording the symbols, excitement building as he recognized fragments about eternal bonds and family alliances. This is going to take some time to translate properly, he murmured to himself, not knowing that across the city, in the Vexillian embassy, Damie was sending a message to her family on their homeworld. The first phase is complete. He has accepted the crystal. Prepare for the ceremonial arrival. Jin Ho stared at his computer screen, eyes burning from lack of sleep. For 3 days, he had been working to translate the strange symbols projected by Damie's crystal. The ancient Vexillian dialect was proving more challenging than he expected, with grammatical structures that seemed to shift depending on context. Just a bit more, he muttered, reaching for his coffee mug only to find it empty again. The projected text contained references to binding souls, eternal commitments, and familial alliances that he initially assumed were cultural stories or myths. His phone buzzed with a message from Director Hyunwoo. Meeting in my office. Now. Jin Ho frowned. The director rarely summoned staff without explanation. He carefully placed the crystal back in its box and headed to the director's office. When he arrived, he was surprised to find not only Director Hyunwoo, but also Ambassador Sung and 2 security officers. Their expressions were grave. Park Jin Ho. Director Hyunwoo said formally, "We need to discuss your recent interactions with junior diplomat Damie of Vexilia." Jin Ho blinked in confusion. Is there a problem? Ambassador Sung stepped forward. We received a formal notice from the Vexillian High Embassy this morning announcing their Supreme Elder's impending arrival to Earth. The purpose stated was, and I quote, to formalize the union between our peoples through the blessed joining of House Zevhar and linguist Park Jin Ho of Earth. Jin Ho's mind raced. I don't understand. What union? Director Hyunwoo slid a tablet across the desk. On it was an official Vexillian document with Jin Ho's name prominently displayed alongside Damie's full Vexillian name, Damie Zevhar Nuttall. This appears to be some kind of binding contract, Ambassador Sung continued. Did you sign anything? Make any verbal agreements with junior diplomat Damie? No, Jin Ho said immediately. She only gave me a crystal as a gift for helping her understand Earth customs. She said it contained cultural stories. The 4 people in the room exchanged concerned glances. Describe this crystal, Director Hyunwoo demanded. Jin Ho described it in detail, including how it projected symbols and seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat. Ambassador Sung's face paled. And you accepted this gift? Officially? Well, yes. It seemed important to her that I acknowledge accepting it. The ambassador closed his eyes briefly. The Vexillians place enormous ceremonial significance on their memory crystals. They're not merely cultural artifacts. They're binding contracts encoded in crystal form. Jin-Ho felt his stomach drop. What kind of contract? Before anyone could answer, there was a commotion outside the office. The door opened, and Jin-Ho's friend Do-yoon from the xenobiology department burst in, looking flustered. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's an urgent." Do-yoon stopped when he saw Jin-Ho. "Oh good, you're here. There's a Vexillian delegation at reception asking for you. They've brought gifts. Lots of gifts." Director Hyunwoo stood abruptly. "How many Vexillians?" 8, I think, all wearing ceremonial attire. And they're setting up some kind of arch in our main lobby." "An arch?" Ambassador Sung looked alarmed. "That's part of their bonding ceremony." Jin-Ho's confusion was quickly turning to panic. "What bonding ceremony? Will someone please explain what's happening?" The director sighed heavily. "Park Jin-Ho, it appears that by accepting this crystal, you may have unknowingly entered into some form of contract with junior diplomat Dami. Based on the language in this document and the presence of ceremonial elements, the Vexillians believe you are to be joined." "Joined?" Jin-Ho repeated numbly. Ambassador Sung nodded grimly. "In human terms, the closest approximation would be marriage. Though Vexillian unions involve deeper legal, political, and genetic implications." Jin-Ho collapsed into a chair. "That's impossible. There must be a misunderstanding. I can't be engaged to an alien diplomat." Just then, Jin-Ho's phone chimed with a message from an unknown number. When he checked it, he found a text written in perfect Korean. "Jin-Ho, it is Dami. My family has arrived earlier than expected. I am sorry if this causes confusion. Please bring the crystal to the ceremony. We are all very excited to welcome you to House HFY." The message was followed by several symbols that Jin-Ho now recognized from the crystal projection, symbols he had translated as eternal bond. "I need to find Dami and clear this up," Jin-Ho said, standing quickly. As they headed toward the lobby, they passed Jin-Ho's office. Through the glass, he could see a Vexillian he didn't recognize examining items on his desk. The alien was holding a framed photo of Jin-Ho's family. "Who is that?" Jin-Ho asked, stopping abruptly. Director Hyunwoo glanced in. "Based on the ceremonial markings, that appears to be a Vexillian lineage keeper. They're responsible for documenting family histories. Why is he in my office?" "Cataloging your lineage, most likely," Ambassador Sung said. "Vexillian unions involve the joining of entire family lines, not just individuals." Jin-Ho felt dizzy. "My parents don't even know about this." When they reached the lobby, Jin-Ho stopped in shock. The space had been transformed. 7 Vexillians in elaborate ceremonial attire were arranging what looked like glowing orbs in a specific pattern. In the center stood Dami, wearing a flowing garment that shifted colors like the northern lights. She spotted Jin-Ho and her 4 eyes lit up. She hurried over, looking more excited than he had ever seen her. "Jin-Ho, you have come. My family was so eager to meet you that they arrived early." She gestured to the assembled Vexillians. "My father, Supreme Elder Jun of House HFY, has brought the traditional pre-union gifts." An older Vexillian with an elaborate crest approached and performed a deep bow. When he spoke, his voice modulator conveyed deep satisfaction. "The future bondmate of my daughter honors us with his presence. The crystal has accepted your life rhythm, confirming the compatibility of our houses. This is most auspicious." Jin-Ho stood frozen, unable to formulate a response. He turned to look at Dami, who was watching him with all 4 eyes, her expression wrapped with happiness. "Dami," he finally managed to say, "I think there's been a misunderstanding about the crystal." Dami's secondary eyes blinked in confusion. "Misunderstanding? But you accepted it officially. The crystal has bonded to your life rhythm. The first phase is complete. It was then that Jin-Ho realized just how lost in translation he truly was. Jin-Ho stood in the small garden behind the Interstellar Relations building, trying to make sense of the situation. Damie stood across from him, her four eyes blinking in different patterns that revealed her confusion and distress. After the chaotic scene in the lobby, Jin-Ho had asked for a private moment to speak with her. So the crystal wasn't just a gift, Jin-Ho said, working to keep his voice calm. It was a marriage proposal. Damie's crest flattened against her head, a sign of embarrassment Jin-Ho had learned to recognize. Not merely a proposal. The crystal is the first binding element of the union itself. When you accepted it, and it synchronized with your life rhythm, the first phase was complete. Jin-Ho ran his hands through his hair. But why didn't you explain this to me? You said it contained cultural stories. It does contain our cultural stories, Damie said, her voice modulator conveying a tone of confusion. The most important stories, those of my family line, our achievements, our alliances. These are essential for you to know as we join our lives. She paused, tilting her head. Did humans once not exchange such information before unions? That's not the point, Jin-Ho said, trying not to let frustration show. The point is that I didn't know I was agreeing to marry you. At the word marry, Damie's translator made a strange sound, like it was searching for the right equivalent. Your word marry is not quite accurate. Vexillian unions are more comprehensive. They bind not only two individuals but their family lines, their social standing, their political alliances. Something in her tone made Jin-Ho pause. Damie, what exactly does your family do on Vexilia? Damie's primary eyes widened. My father is Supreme Elder Jun of House Evhar, third seat on the High Council, and commander of the Eastern Fleet. Our house has protected the borders of Vexillian space for 12 generations. Jin-Ho felt his knees weaken. You're basically royalty, and your father commands a fleet of warships. We do not use the term royalty, but yes, my lineage is among the most honored. And yes, my father commands over 300 vessels. Damie's crest rose slightly with pride before flattening again. I thought you knew. My full title and house standing were in my diplomatic credentials. Jin-Ho vaguely remembered seeing a long string of Vexillian titles and houses in Damie's introduction file. But like most humans, he hadn't paid much attention to the unfamiliar terms. Damie, I can't marry. I mean, enter a union with you. We barely know each other outside of professional interactions. Damie's four eyes blinked in simultaneous distress. Breaking a crystal bond has never been done in recorded Vexillian history. It would bring great shame to my house. I understand this is difficult, Jin-Ho said gently. But surely there must be some way to undo this misunderstanding without causing offense. Before Damie could respond, they were interrupted by Director Kunwu, who approached with a grave expression. Park Jin-Ho, I need you in the conference room immediately. The situation has escalated. When they arrived at the conference room, Jin-Ho was surprised to see not only Ambassador Sung and Damie's father, but also several high-ranking Korean officials and military officers gathered around the table. On a large screen at the end of the room was the stern face of the Korean president. Mr. Park, the president said without preamble, I understand you find yourself in an unusual diplomatic situation. Jin-Ho bowed nervously. Yes, sir. There has been a cultural misunderstanding that I'm working to resolve. Supreme Elder Jun spoke, his voice modulator set to a formal tone. With respect, this is more than a cultural misunderstanding. The crystal bond between my daughter and linguist Park activates certain provisions in our existing diplomatic framework with Earth. Ambassador Sung cleared his throat. We've been reviewing the details of the contract contained in the crystal. It includes significant military protection clauses for Earth. Jin-Ho looked at Damie in confusion. She lowered her secondary eyes. My father insisted on including the standard protection covenant. It is traditional for the more powerful house to pledge protection to their new relations. Director Hyunwoo turned to Jin-Ho. The Vexillian fleet would be obligated to defend Earth against any aggression. Given the recent Morgoth collective expansion toward our solar system, this protection would be invaluable. Jinho felt the weight of everyone's gaze. So if I break this union, Earth loses potential military protection against a hostile alien force. Among other consequences, Supreme Elder Jun added, breaking a crystal bond would also terminate our cultural exchange programs, scientific collaborations, and trade agreements. Such a dishonor would require complete severance of relations. The president spoke again. Mr. Park, I understand this is an enormous personal burden, but the security implications for Earth are significant. Jinho looked at Damie, who was watching him with all four eyes, her expression unreadable to his human perception. Could I have some time to think about this? Jinho asked quietly. The ceremonial period lasts 7 Earth days, Supreme Elder Jun said. After that, the final binding must occur, or, he paused, searching for diplomatic words, relations will be considered rejected. After the meeting, Jinho found himself once again in the garden with Damie. I am sorry, she said softly. I did not intend to place such pressure on you. In my culture, unions are often arranged for strategic purposes. Personal feelings develop over time through the bond. Jinho sat heavily on a bench. On Earth, especially in modern times, we generally marry for love, not strategic alliances. Damie sat beside him, keeping a respectful distance. Love. Your translator uses this word often in human communications, but its precise meaning seems inconsistent. Despite everything, Jinho found himself smiling. That's because it is inconsistent. It's complicated and messy and doesn't always make sense. Like our current situation, Damie observed. Jinho nodded. Exactly. They sat in silence for a moment before Damie spoke again. Jinho, there is something else you should know. The Morgoth Collective's expansion is not just a political concern. They have destroyed 3 inhabited worlds in the past cycle. Their technology is formidable, but the combined Vexillian fleet could protect Earth. Jinho looked at her sharply. Are you saying Earth is in actual danger? Damie's 4 eyes met his in a solemn gaze. The Morgoth scout ships have already entered your outer solar system. My father came not only for the union ceremony, but to warn your leaders. The crystal bond would immediately activate our defense protocols. Jinho felt the cultural complications multiplying by the second. What had begun as a simple misunderstanding now involved planetary security, interstellar diplomacy, and the very real possibility that he might need to marry an alien to help save Earth. I need to see that crystal again, he said finally. If I'm going to make this decision, I need to understand exactly what I'm agreeing to. Jinho sat cross-legged on the floor of his office, surrounded by stacks of reference materials on Vexillian language and culture. The crystal floated inches above a special holder that Supreme Elder Jun had provided, projecting complex symbols onto the white wall before him. After 3 days of intensive study, Jinho was finally beginning to understand the full scope of the contract. The third clause binds not just the 2 individuals, but establishes a mutual defense pact between their worlds, he murmured, making notes in his tablet. But the 5th subsection allows for modifications if both parties stand under the Arch of Truth and declare their intentions. A soft knock interrupted his concentration. Damie entered, carrying a tray with 2 cups. I brought you tea, she said, and a traditional Vexillian energy drink for me. You have not slept in many hours. Jinho rubbed his eyes. Thank you. I think I'm starting to understand the contract better. There may be a way to modify it without breaking it completely. Damie sat beside him, her 4 eyes looking at his notes. You have learned more of our ancient language in 3 days than most Vexillians learn in years. Jinho smiled tiredly. Motivation is a powerful teacher. Before he could explain his findings, Jinho's communication pad buzzed urgently with an emergency alert. Director Hyunwoo's face appeared on the screen, his expression grim. Park Jinho, report to the main conference room immediately. Bring Junior Diplomat Damie. We have a situation. When they arrived, the conference room was filled with tense officials. On the main screen was an image of 3 sleek, black ships approaching Earth's orbit. Morgoth vessels, Supreme Elder Jun said, his crest rigid with alarm. Scout ships, but heavily armed. Ambassador Sung turned to Jinho. They're demanding to speak with you specifically. They claim to have intelligence about the unauthorized alliance between humans and Vexillians. Jinho's heart raced. Me? Why would they want to speak with me? Because, said a deep, rumbling voice from the screen as the image changed to show a Morgoth commander, you are the linchpin of this deception. The Morgoth were reptilian in appearance, with scaled skin that shimmered with an oily iridescence. The commander's yellow eyes seemed to stare directly at Jinho. Human called Jinho, the Morgoth commander said, you have accepted a binding crystal from House Sedevhar, yet no formal announcement of alliance has been made to the Galactic Council. This violates Protocol 7 of the Interstellar Relations Accord. Jinho looked at Director Hyunwoo in confusion. The director whispered, Earth is not a signatory to that accord. We're still considered a developing world with observer status only. Supreme Elder Jun stepped forward. Commander Vesk, this matter is between Vexilia and Earth. The Morgoth Collective has no authority here. The Morgoth commander's scales rippled in what Jinho guessed was anger. We have authority wherever the balance of power is threatened. A secret alliance between Vexilia and Earth gives your forces an unauthorized forward base in a strategic sector. There is no secret alliance, Jinho said, surprising himself by speaking up. There has been a cultural misunderstanding that we're working to resolve. Commander Vesk's yellow eyes narrowed. Then you reject the crystal bond with House Sedevhar. Jinho felt everyone in the room tense. He knew what the Morgoth was doing, trying to force a public rejection that would not only nullify any protection for Earth, but also deeply insult the Vexillians. The situation is more complex than that, Jinho replied carefully. As a linguist, I believe in finding the right words to express truth. The crystal bond exists, but its exact nature and implications are still being discussed. The Morgoth commander hissed, vague diplomatic words. If Earth stands with Vexilia, then Earth becomes our concern as well. We cannot allow House Sedevhar to establish military influence in this sector. Admiral Lee of Earth's Defense Forces spoke up. Are you threatening Earth, Commander Vesk? Not threatening. Clarifying consequences. The Morgoth's scales shifted to a darker hue. We give you 24 Earth hours to publicly reject the alliance, or we will consider Earth a Vexillian military outpost and respond accordingly. The screen went black. In the stunned silence that followed, Jinho turned to Supreme Elder Jun. Could the Vexillian fleet reach Earth in time if they attacked? The Supreme Elder's crest flattened. Our main fleet is 3 days from Earth at maximum speed. We have only 2 ceremonial vessels here with limited defensive capabilities. Director Hyunwoo looked grim. Our planetary defenses aren't designed to repel that level of technology. Jinho's mind raced. What if we could delay them? Buy time for the Vexillian fleet to arrive. Damie touched his arm gently. The Morgoth are not known for patience or negotiation. No, Jinho agreed, but they do value legal protocols and technicalities. That's why they cited the Interstellar Relations Accord. He turned to Supreme Elder Jun. Sir, I need to know more about the Arch of Truth mentioned in the Crystal Contract. The Supreme Elder's eyes widened. It is our most sacred ceremonial object. No false words can be spoken beneath it. The arch itself reveals deception through color changes. And it's here, on your ceremonial ship. Yes, for the final binding ceremony. Jinho nodded, a plan forming. I think I know how to handle this, but I'll need everyone's cooperation, and I'll need to finish translating one more section of the Crystal Contract. 6 hours later, Jinho stood before a hastily assembled interstellar broadcast system. The Arch of Truth, a towering structure of what looked like liquid metal that constantly flowed in graceful patterns, had been set up in the main diplomatic hall. Beside him stood Damie, dressed in formal Vexillian attire. Representatives from Earth governments and the Vexillian delegation formed a semicircle around them. The broadcast connected, and Commander Vesk's reptilian face appeared on the main screen. "You have reached a decision, human." "We have," Jin-Ho replied. "And as this matter involves serious interstellar implications, we will conduct these proceedings under the Arch of Truth, as is the right of any party cited under the Interstellar Relations Accord." The Morgoth commander's scales rippled in surprise. He clearly hadn't expected humans to know about such protocols. "Proceed," he said cautiously. Jin-Ho and Damie stepped under the arch, which began to glow with a soft blue light. "I, Park Jin-Ho of Earth, stand before the Arch of Truth to clarify the nature of my bond with Damie Zevhar Nuttall of Vexilia." The arch's light remained steady blue, indicating truth. While I accepted the crystal in good faith, I did so without full understanding of its implications. The Morgoth commander's scales shifted to an eager pattern. "So you reject the bond?" Jin-Ho smiled slightly. "No. Under Article 7, Subsection 3 of the ancient crystal text, I invoke the right of clarification." Supreme Elder Jun gasped audibly. Jin-Ho continued, "Damie and I are creating a new type of alliance, not the traditional Vexillian union, but a cultural ambassadorship that preserves the protection clauses while modifying the personal obligations." The arch pulsed with blue light, confirming his words as true. The Morgoth commander hissed in frustration. "This is a deception, a mere rewording of the same alliance. It is a legitimate interpretation of ancient Vexillian law." Jin-Ho replied calmly, "One that the Arch of Truth confirms as honest, according to the very protocols you cited. Commander Vesk, you must honor this clarification." On the screen, other Morgoth officers could be seen conferring urgently with the commander. Jin-Ho knew they had bought Earth valuable time. The Vexillian fleet was already speeding toward Earth, and the Morgoth would have to consult their own legal experts before acting. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. As the broadcast ended, Damie looked at him with all four eyes shining. "You found a third path," she said softly. Jin-Ho nodded. "Not a rejection, not a traditional union, but something new, something that honors both our cultures." 3 months had passed since the crisis with the Morgoth Collective. Jin-Ho stood on the observation deck of the Interstellar Relations Building, watching the sunset paint Seoul's skyline in golden hues. Beside him, Damie's skin reflected the warm light, giving her an almost ethereal glow. "The Morgoth ships have moved beyond Neptune's orbit," Damie said, her four eyes tracking the holographic display that showed the positions of various vessels in the solar system. "My father believes they will not return for some time." Jin-Ho nodded. The cultural ambassadorship agreement worked better than I expected. What had begun as a desperate measure to buy time had evolved into something truly innovative. The modified contract, now called the Earth Vexilia Cultural Protection Treaty, had been formally recognized by the Galactic Council. It preserved the military protection clauses while removing the personal union aspects that had caused such confusion. "My father was initially disappointed," Damie admitted. "He had hoped for a traditional alliance through union, but now he speaks of your solution to other houses as an example of human ingenuity." Jin-Ho smiled. "And how do you feel about it?" Damie's secondary eyes blinked in a pattern Jin-Ho had come to recognize as thoughtful consideration. "I have had time to reflect on my actions. I should have explained the crystal's significance more clearly. In my eagerness to secure the alliance, I relied too much on assumptions." "We both made mistakes," Jin-Ho said. "I should have asked more questions before accepting such an important gift." A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched the sun sink lower. Over the past months, they had continued their cultural exchange sessions, but with a new depth of understanding. Jin-Ho had learned more about Vexillian customs and language, while Damie had immersed herself in human literature and art. "The first group of human students leaves for Vexilia next week," Jin-Ho said. changing the subject. 20 young linguists excited to study at the Grand Academy, and 15 Vexillian scholars will arrive to study Earth cultures, Damie added. The exchange program has exceeded all expectations. The cultural ambassadorship had opened doors that neither world had anticipated. Scientific collaboration had accelerated, trade agreements had been established, and cultural exchanges were flourishing. The Vexillian fleet maintained a protective presence in the outer solar system, deterring any further Morgoth incursions. "I have something for you," Jin-Ho said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small wooden box carved with Korean symbols. Damie's crest rose in surprise. A gift. A proper one this time, with full explanation of its meaning. Jin-Ho said with a smile. "This is a traditional Korean friendship token. It symbolizes a bond between equals who respect and value each other's differences." He opened the box to reveal a pendant made of wood and silver. The design combined Korean and Vexillian symbols in a harmonious pattern. "It carries no legal obligations," Jin-Ho continued. "No military alliances or diplomatic consequences. Just a personal token of friendship and respect." Damie carefully took the pendant, examining it with all four eyes. "It is beautiful. You carved this yourself?" Jin-Ho nodded. "I've been taking lessons from a traditional craftsman. It took several attempts to get the Vexillian symbols right." Damie's skin flushed a deeper blue, a sign of emotion that Jin-Ho had learned to recognize. "I am honored to accept this gift with full understanding of its meaning." She placed the pendant around her neck, where it nestled against her ceremonial attire. "There is a human custom I have been studying," Damie said after a moment. "Your people often share meals together to strengthen bonds of friendship. Would you join me for dinner? I have reserved a space in the interspecies dining facility where they can prepare both human and Vexillian cuisine." Jin-Ho smiled. "I'd like that very much." As they walked toward the elevator, Director Hyun-woo approached with a tablet in hand.